was discharged, doctor will also give a discharge summary, and somehow you also receive the discharge summary along with your adverse event reporting form. So you need to sit down and look into the discharge summary for the information like the lab data, which was done, age of the patient, demographics of the patient, any concomitant medications, what are the treatments given after the adverse event, what happened to the adverse event later on, the outcome of the event. So all that information you have to dig in the discharge notes or discharge summary to find out and put it in your data fields as well as in your narrative section. Now, yeah, there are more of basics of narrative. Um, the time to event onset can be in time units. So now the time to event onset is also called as latency. And here usually we follow 24 hours format, hours or days. So what happens, suppose a patient has taken metformin, which is our product, at 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. bedtime. And the patient has had event of bloating morning around 6 o'clock. So now 6 a.m. So now you have the latency of 9 hours. So you can mention that in the narrative saying that um, on March 2nd, 2025, the patient took metformin. Then you will change the date. You have to write March 3rd, 2025. The patient has experienced bloating after 9 hours of taking metformin. So like that, you can mention the latency in the narrative. And when it goes beyond the hours, you can even calculate the days. When it goes beyond the days, you can even calculate it with months, year, or things like that. And then you can put that in the narrative section. And even in the database, we have this option of putting the latency somewhere. So when you write that latency over there, if it is an auto-generated narrative, mostly it is pulled up in the narrative, and you can always go back and do the recheck whether it has populated correctly or not. And then you can have conflicting information from different sources, which should be mentioned and sources identified. Now, what happens? There are sometimes you can have two different dates given for the same event. What will you do in such scenarios? So we need to query to the site or we need to query to the reporter. And we have to also mention this thing in the narrative, like in the adverse event reporting form, in the event section, it is mentioned on March 2nd, 2025, patient has an event of headache. And in the narrative of a event reporting form, it is mentioned like on March 3rd, patient has a headache. So now you have two dates with headache. So you can mention that in the narrative. March 2nd, 2025, the patient experienced headache. And in the parenthesis, you can mention also reported as March 3rd, 2025. So like that, we look after the conflicting information, and that is how we put that information in the narrative. But we definitely have to query to the site or reporter to find out the actual date. Now, any kind of judgmental comment should be avoided due to the legal implications. Like overdose, medication errors, it is very important to state the fact. For example, if it is reported like 4 times the normal dose has been administered, and a prescription was misread, and a contraindication drug for this patient was given. If something like this is given 4 times the normal dose, then you can pick it up as overdose. Otherwise, until and unless it is mentioned something like that, we are not supposed to make our own judgment and pick up the event. any kind of medication